I'd like now the first panel, Laying the Foundation, the Competitive Value of Northern California Maritime and Industrial Economy, to please come up here. The moderator is Scott Warner, who is a past president of BPCs with ENVIRON. Sean Randolph is one of the panelists from the Bay Area Economic Institute. Beth Fisher from the Port of Oakland. EUNICE GARCIA is working here for PG&E, and Colin Maynard from from the WISPA. And as everybody's coming up here, the mayor talked about a number of statistics. If you go to page 10 through 12 of your program, you're going to see some great statistics, not on just Oakland, but here in the general greater Bay Area.
Now it means I need to do something, I guess, because I didn't for 2 years. I get this. No, thank you, John. I really appreciate it. It's really a pleasure to be here with you all today. This is a great venue. We really thank the Scottish Rite Temple for providing this for us. And you know, the Decision Makers Conference is just that. It's about the conference for all of you who are the decision makers, and that's what we are here to do. We're here to have a conversation. We're here to develop actions going forward, or solutions, hopefully, or start solutions to our actions going forward. So I'm very excited to introduce our panel this morning. I feel like starting with a joke. I feel like starting with, did you hear about the story where an economist, a business development marketer, a senior manager, and a PR guy were stranded on an island? Well, here's the island, and here are the four of them, and we're going to have a conversation about really what drives the Bay Area, and that is our industrial and maritime economy. If you go back to the history over 2 centuries of how the Bay Area got started, it's really about the fact that we're on the water, and we developed an industrial complex to transport goods, to receive goods, to develop an economy, and from that you see what has developed now in the year 2015. But there are challenges to keeping that going, and the Bay Planning Coalition, along with all its partners, including yourselves, are here to make sure that keeps going. We want that balance between the industrial economy, between the environmental, between the social, about the quality of life, but we can't forget why we're here in the first place and what we need to do to keep going. And with our panelists today, I think we're going to have a terrific conversation about what makes us tick, what those challenges are, how we work together to solve those and keep things going forward. And even when California is the forefront of what you might say the media attention, whether it's about the drought, whether it's about agriculture, whether it's about maritime, whatever it is, we have a solution to keep things going forward. And that's why I'm very proud to be a native Californian. I like being here. I like keeping the state going forward, and we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, so let me introduce our panelists. First of all, our speakers are going to come up, give a short presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion, answers, etc., till about 10:40, and then we'll take a break. First, we'll have Sean Randolph, who's the Senior Director for the Bay Area Council Economic Institute. And Sean has been with us many times. We're very pleased to have him again. A number of things that he has authored and developed over the years, and we're very excited to hear about the economics that he's going to bring to us. Beth Frisher, who is the Manager of Business Development and International Marketing, Port of Oakland. I haven't worked with Beth much, but we talked a little bit last night, and I'm very excited to have her discuss how the Port of Oakland, what it means to us and what the challenges are. She's also a graduate of the NCAA basketball champions. I understand. No one likes it. Well, okay. I'll let her deal with that. EUNICE GARCIA with the East Bay Division and a Senior Manager for PG&E, who is so incredibly important to our Bay Area economy from the standpoint of what it provides to us. It is in the news a lot. We all rely on PG&E, and the challenges for how we provide energy moving forward is real. How it affects the maritime and the industrial is important, and we're very much looking forward to EUNICE's discussions. And Colin Maynard, who's the Manager of Strategic Communications for the Western States Petroleum Association. The Bay Area, again, is home to one of the largest energy providers in the world. And that energy is crucial to our economy. And there are challenges. We know about those challenges. And we're very much looking forward to Colin's discussion and presentation and addressing the questions from both the panelists and yourselves as far as how we maintain that positive energy balance within this area. We continue to provide the jobs and the resources to move forward. So with that, you don't need to hear me anymore. We need to hear our speakers. So what we're going to do is each of the speakers are going to come up, give a short presentation. They'll just follow each other. So once one is done, we'll continue on. And at the end of that, what we're going to have is have a question and answer period. There are a number of blue cards. They'll be out there. So what we're going to ask you to do is fill out your questions on those blue cards. They'll come up here. We'll go through them. We'll go through as many as we absolutely can for all the panelists. If we don't answer them, we'll try and answer them in writing later on. Okay, so we're going to move this podium over. Are we going to move this now or later? Okay, we're going to move it after the presentation, so I'll have Sean come up now.
Well, thanks very much, Scott. It's great to be back at the Decision Makers Conference. It's an important event, important organization, and we have some important things to talk about today. I'll get us going talking a little bit about the economy. But first I have to say, this is an amazing place. I come almost every year to the Christmas revels upstairs, and when I heard the conference was at the Scottish Rite building, I thought, how's that going to work? This big, steeply tiered auditorium. Had no idea this fantastic ballroom was down here. So Oakland is a city full of marvels, always something else to discover. But on our economy, so we actually, right now in the Bay Area, are in an amazingly privileged position. This is almost anybody you talk to around the country or around the world would acknowledge is the most dynamic metropolitan economy in the United States. And at the very least, one of the most dynamic in the world. We're actually the world's 23rd largest economy, if you measure it by gross economic product, about equivalent to Saudi Arabia or Sweden or Belgium. So the size of a good-sized European economy, all within 50 miles of where we are right now. We shouldn't take that for granted. If you go out of the Bay Area, elsewhere in California, around most of the country, you don't see the energy that you see here and the dynamic change going on every day. And so I think we have to recognize we are in right now an extraordinary place. We're in a good place. We have to be investing and continuing to reinvest in the things that are making that happen to maintain that position going forward. And what is taking us there? We're basically an economy in the Bay Area led by technology and led by innovation. It's not all about that. We have actually a very healthy, diverse economy between transportation and retail and wholesale and aspects of agriculture and financial services and manufacturing. And that balance in the economy is a very healthy, good thing. But when we ask what is pulling it forward or what could pull it back if it were to fall back or fail, it is primarily technology. When you look at the venture capital industry, historically about a third of all the venture investment in the United States has been here in the Bay Area, within 50 miles of here. Last year, it was more than 50% of all the venture investment in the United States took place here in the Bay Area. We have more incubators and accelerators hosting entrepreneurs and early-stage companies and startups than any place else in the world. We have one of the most diverse and certainly the most highly educated workforce in the country. The only places that come close to us in terms of the number of people in our population with advanced degrees or bachelor's degrees are Boston and Washington, D.C. We're all about more or less on a par, but it's this immense pool of human capital also that is accelerating and enriching the economic process. And what's happening there, it is drawing in people and companies day by day from around the world. We have our challenges. Obviously, we've had these for years, and we have to keep them in sight. The quality of K-12 education, very serious issues there. Transportation, congestion, you want to build something, you're going to run into opposition over congestion in neighborhoods. That ain't going away. The biggest issue, I think we all live this, we see it every day, is the cost of housing. We have the highest housing cost in the entire United States. We are at the equivalent level of Manhattan, which has all sorts of competitive issues. So let's acknowledge those challenges. We have to keep focusing on them. But even as we do, as I said, the world is pouring in here. Companies are coming in every single day to establish R&D centers and offices in the Bay Area. Workers and entrepreneurs are coming in from virtually everywhere in the world, as well as around the U.S. And what that tells us is that this economy in the Bay Area is at the least one of the most globalized, maybe the most globalized economy in the U.S., along with New York. International trade is a big part of that. It is hardwired into the DNA of this region ever since we started as a maritime center back in the days of the gold rush. So I'll talk for a moment about trade because this really ties into what we're talking about, the maritime industry here in the Bay Area. So the Bay Area is the fourth largest exporting region in the U.S. We export right now about $55 billion in products a year. That's more than a third. It's about 36% of all the exports that go out of California. They go primarily, no big surprise here, to Asia. They go to Mexico and Canada and to Europe primarily. But obviously, Asia is a big destination, especially for our maritime exports. So that trade supports about 380,000 jobs here in the Bay Area. About 200,000 of those are direct jobs in production of goods and services that are going out of the country. So it's a big piece of our employment base. And the exports are almost evenly divided between the Fremont, Oakland, San Francisco metropolitan area, it's a technical term, metropolitan area, and also the Santa Clara, Silicon Valley area. So there's a good balance between those, and that's where it's come from. And what are we selling around the world? It's led by technology. It doesn't matter what country you're talking about, whether it's Germany or Botswana or Chile or the Philippines, very strong likelihood the number one thing we're selling to them is technology. 2013, we exported about $25 billion in technology products out of the area. Probably, when the numbers come in for last year, it'll be about $26 billion. Next year, we're guessing maybe $30 billion in technology exports are going to flow out of the Bay Area here. So it's a really big deal. Oh, I should advance this, shouldn't I? I may need help making this. Oh, I see. I had it upside down. I'm technically challenged. I think one thing to keep in mind is that 95% of these exporters are small and medium businesses. Some of the really big companies export the big dollar values, but when you look at the number of companies that are actually doing international business, moving things in and out of our ports and airports, almost all of them are small and medium enterprises, meaning that they're pretty hardwired and deeply embedded in the fabric of our communities. We are also, as everybody knows, a major outlet for agricultural goods going out of the Central Valley, so the Port of Oakland is a major link there. I think when you look also at the dependence of our economy on trade, the Economic Institute for about the last 10 or 12 years has done a survey looking at how much of a company's exports, or how much of a company's revenues come from exports and international trade versus how much comes from sales to the domestic U.S. market. And so we developed this index of about 50 companies. It's a little less than 40 now because of mergers and things. And we've looked at that in every other year. And what we have seen progressively, except for 1 or 2 years during the big global recession when everything just went on pause, is that for almost all of our exporting companies, that the share of their revenues derive from global markets derived from global sales has been growing progressively year by year by year by year. And the share of their revenues derived from sales within the United States has been falling. Now, those revenues in most cases have been going up. Domestic sales have been going up and global sales have been going up. But global sales have been growing for most of our major companies across different industries significantly faster than the sales to the U.S. market. And in fact, a lot of the statistics that companies report in their annual reports, they include Mexico and Canada with domestic. If you added those to the global column, we'd see an even stronger skewing toward global markets. So that is extremely important when we think about why the maritime economy is really important to us. Not all of the trade is maritime, of course. We have a lot of high-value goods that go out by air, primarily from San Francisco International Airport. A lot of that tends to be technology goods, lighter goods, biotech products, flowers, things of that nature. But the Port of Oakland, as Mayor Schaaf said, it's the most significant export port in the United States in the sense that more goes out than comes in by weight, a major outlet for agricultural goods, industrial goods, and the like. I think it's really important to note also, because this is really, it's very, very real for our small and medium-sized businesses as well as big businesses, what happens through the port in terms of our dependence on what comes on and off the ships. Now, when we had the big labor slowdowns a couple of months ago, that really became very, very apparent. The last big slowdown, which was 10 or 15 years ago, the estimate there was about $1 billion a day that was lost to the economy from that slowdown. The best estimate was that for this last experience, had the ports shut down, there would have been a cost of about $670 million per day for a 5-day slowdown. That would have gone up to as much as $2 billion a day had it gone on for 20 days or so. So that is an enormous cost. And also when we look at the impacts that were felt by business, just a couple of really small examples. There's a company out here in the Central Valley called Monte Vista Farming. They produce almonds. They export most of their crop. January 2015 versus January 2014, they had to let go of 1/3 of their employees, about 75 total staff, about 25 were sidelined. You had citrus growers who basically were unable to move their product, their warehouses were filled, the product was going to be left unpicked, the trees were at risk. Glass products couldn't produce, companies producing glass products couldn't produce their goods. And a really interesting example, some of the high-rises you see in downtown San Francisco, they had topped up 40, 50-story buildings. They couldn't get the glass panels on because they are on ships waiting for 1 month to 2 months. So these are real consequences for the economy. So it's very real. It impacts a lot of our small and medium businesses. It's not just big businesses. In conclusion, I would say that we have infrastructure issues. We have to look at things like I-580, the ability to move our goods by truck, not to mention by rail, as our highway congestion is growing with passenger cars. International trade services are important. The state of California now has an office in China. We used to have 15 overseas offices for the state. Thank God we have one now, but the infrastructure to support our small and medium exporters is not what it was. And it's a longer discussion, but there are 3 big trade agreements coming up. There's Trade Promotion Authority that will be voted on in Congress very soon. That's going to be, here we are. That's going to give the president authority to negotiate agreements, 1 up or down vote by Congress. You got to get that to get the next big agreements through. The Trans-Pacific Agreement, 11 Pacific countries, are major export markets. The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, negotiation with 28 European countries, our other big market. Those are going to be very important to our economy. our international trade economy, our maritime economy, and I think it's important that we all start to focus on those upcoming votes. And there's a lot more to talk about. Thanks.
So I think I must have the easiest job of the day because Sean has set the framework of the economic and trade impact. And of course, Libby Schaff did such an amazing job talking about the Port of Oakland that I might not even need to, but we will. So in case you don't recognize on the screen there, we like to, when we talk about the Port of Oakland, we like to highlight the skyline of Oakland because we want it to be as recognizable as Hong Kong or New York or San Francisco. So this is what you're looking at. I don't know if this is going to work. Okay, it seems to be a little slow. Okay, so thank you very much, John, and the BPC for inviting the port to come and speak, and on this first panel about sort of laying the foundation and the importance of the Bay Area ports in the economy, San Francisco Bay economy and the regional economy. My perspective, of course, is going to be about the Port of Oakland, but I do want to make sure that we recognize all of our other Bay Area ports, whether it is Benicia, Vallejo, Stockton, Redwood City, West Sacramento, Port of San Francisco, and of course Richmond. We all have our own niches, with the Port of Oakland being containerized, but whether or not it's liquefied, bulk or passenger, we all do feed into this maritime economy here. So that's for our sister ports there. Just as an overview, I think many of you in this room are probably very familiar with the Port of Oakland, but the Port of Oakland is not just a seaport, although we really love the fact that everyone identifies the Port of Oakland with these terrifically iconic cranes that line our 20 miles of land there in Oakland. But we're also the airport, and we also have about 20 miles of shoreline and property that we manage in our commercial real estate group, and of course Jack London Square. But looking at the seaport itself, we're actually a landlord port. So when you think about Savannah and some of these other East Coast ports, they actually operate their port. We don't operate our port. We have our marine terminal operators who are operating our terminals. And that's a really, really, really important thing to know, especially when we talk about some of the recent activity that's happened on the West Coast. The Port of Oakland was not at the negotiating table with labor because we are a landlord port. We have 5 terminals, about 700 acres covering with those 5 terminals. 36 cranes, I love those cranes. About 23 of them are owned by the port, and then the rest of them are private. Our channels are at 50 feet, and that's really critical when you see what's happened in the ocean carrier business and industry over the last few years. These ships are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And a 42-foot draft doesn't cut it anymore. We have to have 50 feet. So our channels and berths are dredged to 50 feet. So that's certainly puts us on the map in terms of being competitive with Southern California and other ports around the country. We've got about 2,000 vessel calls a year. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the other side. 2.4 million TEU, sorry for an industry acronym. A TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit. So think of the 40-foot boxes on the back of the chassis rolling down the highway. This one's half of that, so it's a 20-foot, and that's kind of our metric that we use. But a bit over 2 million TEUs that we move. And we've got 25 ocean carriers that actually call into Port of Oakland, most of them on a weekly basis. Let's see if this moves forward. In terms of jobs, and thanks, Sean, because you already really laid this out here, but in terms of jobs, the Port of Oakland powers about 73,565 in the region. Between the airport and the seaport, the airport for every 1,000 passengers, it's responsible for about a little bit over 3 direct jobs. For every 1,000 containers or boxes that you see lifting off those ships out there, that's responsible for about 8 jobs. And I'm talking about direct jobs. So the 73,000 number in terms of regional jobs is both direct and indirect jobs. The seaport powers about 40% of that 73,000 number. Oh, this is a little slow. Just want to stay on the jobs impact just for a minute. You know, at the port, and Mayor Schaaf spoke about it a bit, on the Oakland Army base. Well, on the port side, there's actually a port side and a city side to that development of the 360 acres. But on the port side, we've broken ground a couple of years ago on phase 1, which is a rail project. And if you look at that rail project, the amount, the bids awarded on that were amounted to about $47 million. Of that, about 24 million of that has already been earned. So since May of 2013 through January, this slide looks at just January, we really have a commitment to making sure that those jobs are staying in the region. And even more so than that, we have a local business area, which are the, the cities of Oakland, Emeryville, San Leandro, Alameda. And then we have a local business, a local impact area, which would be Contra Costa and Alameda counties. So in awarding that phase 1 rail project, about 61% of all of the jobs created as a result of that or engaged as a result of that actually went to our local impact area and our local business area. And that's really, really important to us at the Port of Oakland. Let's see, it's a little slow. Just speaking about trade, and I think, Sean, you topped on it a little bit, about 70, almost 80%, 75, 80% of our trade through the Port of Oakland containerized is with Asia, followed by Europe and then Oceania, so Australia, New Zealand. So those are really important relationships for us to have with both the countries and the trade representatives there, but also our ocean carriers that have their vessel network set up to serve us. Yeah, that's probably all I want to say on that. In terms of the Port of Oakland, and it's something that we are very, very focused on here, we handle 99% of the containerized goods coming through the region. The mega region here reaches and serves 14.5 million consumers, but more importantly, within a 7-hour drive, you've reached about 30 million consumers and customers. And then if you start looking at our rail connections, then if you go out, you're starting to look at within 2 to 3 days, you're hitting 50% of the US population. So if you look at the Port of Oakland's growth over the last 10 years, container growth has kind of gone up, bit by bit, but compounded annual growth year on year after year after year, 2.3%, 3%, 2%. We don't really like that number. We like the number because it's positive, but we don't like the number as a growth mechanism. So one of the things the port is looking at, and we'll talk about it on the other side, is we have to regain a first inbound call to Oakland. Right now, all of the vessels that are coming from Asia go to Southern California first. There's some implications there because these vessels are getting larger and larger and larger, taking a lot longer to work. Then they come up here, they do their small little local moves, and then they go back to Asia. So one of our strategic priorities is to get a first inbound call into the Port of Oakland so that we can start to capture some of this Midwestern import cargo. We have rail connections with the UP and the BNSF to serve into the Midwest very, very competitively with LA and Long Beach and certainly the PNW. Utah, Colorado, Kansas City, Memphis, there's no reason from either an export or import standpoint that Port of Oakland shouldn't be the port of choice, gateway. So there's my pitch for my first inbound call, which we will get. So you can't really talk about the port, any port on the West Coast right now without talking about what's recently happened. And the funnel kind of on your left here kind of shows you this perfect storm of events. Let's start with the mega ships. The ships are getting larger and larger and larger and larger and larger. And unfortunately, we all had an opportunity to actually see them up close and personal recently when they were all anchored out in the bay. But those vessels are taking 3 to 4 to 5 days to work down in LA when things are working. It's taken that long to get the cargo off of it, whereas it used to stay maybe 2 or 3 days down in LA and then come up to Oakland, and we were here for a day and out. It's taken 4 to 5 days. The infrastructure is really, really stressed on the West Coast from the advent of these new larger vessels. So then you couple that with chassis shortages. That's the trailer that the box goes onto. You couple that, then layer it on, perfect storm, a labor dispute and disagreement and no contract. And we've had massive, massive cargo diversions. We've had delays. You've all seen out in the bay that we had at one point up to 19 ships sitting either at anchor or drifting. The term is called, technically it's called holding station, but it's drifting, just beyond the Golden Gate Bridge. And while they're really lovely to look at, it's really disastrous for local companies here, whether it's the guy who was in Oakland who was just starting his craft brewery and he needed all of his equipment so he could get to the San Francisco Beer Festival in time. All of his equipment was sitting on a vessel sitting outside of the Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, there are some real impacts and to our consumers here and to our small businesses and large businesses. So year on year in January, our TEU, that's our volume metric, we were down about 33% year on year. That's massive. There are not many entities that want to be down year on year 33%. More importantly, or as importantly, 53% of our vessel calls that usually came to Oakland were bypassed. They just bypassed Oakland. They cut and run out of Southern California. They got to get back to Asia. So it's been a pretty dire situation. It's had massive, massive impacts here in the local economy and the regional economy. But I don't want to all be doom and gloom. We have made a lot of progress. And so I'd like to talk to you just quickly about some of the things that we're really focused on. First of all, there are no container ships out there anymore. The ships that you see, I think, are bulk carriers, Panamax, what have you, out in the bay, but there are no container ships out there. So from February 17th, when we had 19 of those beautiful ships sitting out in the bay or right beyond the Golden Gate Bridge, 19 right before the labor dispute was tentatively agreed to and resolved, to 0 today, and that's been for about 2 weeks now that we've seen that 0 vessels. So we've really done a great job, and labor, the crane operators have really, they're one of the most productive actually on the West Coast, with about 30 to 40 boxes an hour off the ship. So that's good news. Ocean carriers are restoring their calls by the May, I'm going to say by May, 1st of May, we should have close to 100% reinstatement of all these vessel calls. Can't understate the value of that. The guy who, and Sean, you kind of pointed to it, but you know, the guy who's got a perishable good, who's sitting in the valley, if he can't get on a ship, that stuff rots. I mean, it just rots. He loses the contract. They can source it from Brazil. They can source it from Australia, from Asia, you know, wherever it is. So it's a real risk, and it's really, I think, speaks to the importance of not just the Port of Oakland, but all of our ports here in the Bay Area. And customer volume is coming back. We really do see that on a week-to-week basis, whether it's Cost Plus, nice local Oakland company, or you know, Blue Diamond or Tesla or whomever it is. We really are seeing that cargo coming back. So kind of moving on, and like I said, I almost don't even need to do this part because Mayor Schaaf has done such a great job talking about the Port of Oakland, but it is really critical for us that we think about, you know, how do we make sure that we not just serve our local market, but we actually thrive as a port, thrive as a maritime industry, and really grow this region. You know, 2.3% compounded annual growth rate, that's okay. That's not what we want to be. We really want to be more than just the local, you know, region's gateway. So, you know, if you're Tesla, well, where else would you go because you're right down there in Hayward? Well, no, that's not what we want. We also want the grain guys, and we want the, you know, pick it out, the refrigerated, you know, whatever it is. We really want them to proactively select Oakland. So I've got 1 minute. I'm going to go really fast on this. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the projects that we're working on. Mayor Schaaf talked very eloquently about the Oakland Army base and kind of gave you a highlight on that. But we are in phase one. It will be completed on time and on budget by the end of this year of laying new rail tracks. If you go between the city and the East Bay and over the bridge and down 880, I think that highway is, you'll see every day, every week, there's progress. You just can't imagine how quickly these railroads are going in and so forth. So this is going to enable us to really start to attract an inbound call or inbound calls, first inbound calls to Oakland, and it's going to attract more business. So this is really part of a whole integrated lineage and Dryasback. We are working with them, and they are developing a refrigerated cold storage right in the middle of the port. I'm telling you, when you look at the other ports in this country, when they talk about their capital campaigns, they are talking about roads and bridges and infrastructure, and that's great. We're talking about integrated logistics solutions inside the footprint of the port. No other port has this. So competitively, we're very excited about where we're positioned and what we're going to be able to offer. So cold storage, I think I'm probably over my minute I had. Grain transloads, Central Valley Ag Grinding Company, massive outfit down in the valley. They're taking one of our properties, some of our land, and putting in a grain transload facility there. What that means, really, why that's important, is they can take heavy containers. So we don't want overweight containers, trucks on our roads. It's against the law. We don't want it. It's a risk. It's danger. Now they can put this heavy product at their site in a rail car, bring it right into the port, inside the overweight quarter where it's no risk to anyone, transload that, and that's what this facility will do, get it on the rail, get it on the vessel, and export it over to Asia. Huge demand growing for grain, animal products, DDG, agricultural products in Asia. And then finally, and this encompasses both the city side and the port side of development, with CCIG involved on the city side and the Port of Oakland with various entities. But we'll have a logistics complex there that, again, this whole integrated roadmap for how do we grow the Port of Oakland and make sure that we not only survive, but thrive and grow. So you've also seen, driving down 880, lots of development and a lot of the groundwork is being done there now. And this eventually is what we think it's going to look like. It's an architectural rendering, but pretty vibrant, pretty exciting. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
So I'm Eunice Barnett-Garcia, East Bay Division Senior Manager with PG&E, and probably a lot of you know Tom Garino better than you know me. So we work really closely together. And today I'm going to be talking a little bit about how PG&E supports with local growth, future demand that's coming online, and some of the plans and ways that we're going to be addressing that. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's a little bit of a delay. Okay. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about PG&E's economic development rate, which we have a new version that just got approved this year to help businesses stay in California, and talking about our large infrastructure investment, both from a traditional standpoint in terms of sourcing and also looking at our renewable sourcing. And looking across our system locally here in Bay Region and bring it home right here to East Bay Division with a couple local examples in the Port and Maritime area. And then last but not least, energy efficiency, which is one of my favorites. We have a lot of programs to help businesses, whether you're existing business or you're a developer bringing on new building, to make sure that as we continue to grow as a local community that we're doing that in the greenest way possible. And we have a lot of dollars to help pay for energy efficient design right from the beginning. And a couple of fun facts at the bottom. PG&E's been researching the economic impacts that we have across our service area. There's about $22 billion of economic activity that our operations have stimulated, both in terms of the market value of the services, in terms of our buying and selling, and also the ripple effects that come with that, and about 71,000 jobs that are supported through our operations across PG&E's service area. So the economic development rate, there's a couple ways that you can apply and be eligible for this, and the one that's probably you've heard of more often is if you're in an area or a community, a city that has an unemployment rate that is 30% above the state average, so that's 9.3% right now, then you're able to qualify for a 30% reduction over 5 years in your bill. Now, the nice thing is here in the Bay region, we don't have a lot of cities that have that high of an unemployment rate. So there's a second way actually that you can qualify still. So if you're a company that maybe is saying, hey, you know, we want to stay in California, we want to stay in the Bay Area, but we really feel like the cost of our energy is prohibitive and that's something that might cause us to move out of state. We have a team of folks that you can work with, and we will go through an assessment and evaluation process, and if you're found to be eligible, you can qualify for up to a 12% reduction over 5 years on your energy cost as well. So if there's anyone here that's in that situation, my email's at the end of this presentation. Feel free to reach out to me if you're not sure who to get in contact with. And then I wanted to mention different ways that we're investing system-wide in our community and in economic development. In the top bullets there, you'll see a lot of figures that speak to, you know, the $5 billion that we're working on to enhance our reliability and system safety, both on the gas and electric side, as well as franchise fee payments, property tax payments, and then community investments as well with community-based organizations. So we have a few key areas that we focus on, being the environment, education, organizations that spur economic development, and then a new one this year that we're looking at is emergency response as well. And that's all of those areas are really important ways that we help to support growth in this region and more broadly. And I always like to say as well that, you know, it's not just traditional energy sources that we're looking at. When we want to be sustainable as growth happens, renewables become very important to this conversation. So the bottom bullets there speak to leadership that we have across the country actually in terms of our support of renewables. And PG&E actually has more rooftop solar than any other utility in the country, and 1/4 or 25% of all rooftop solar, basically 1/4 of that, it's all in our service territory. And then there's some interesting facts there about how quickly solar installations are coming online day by day, every 11 minutes there. So we definitely are in support of that. And another big question that often comes up, okay, as we're growing PG&E, how clean really is your power mix? What are you doing in terms of your own procurement? And this year, in 2014, we just published in our last 10K report that we are at 55% of our power mix is greenhouse gas emission free. And that does include nuclear and large hydro, which we know is not approved. Well, some of us know. There's some questions as to what those environmental impacts might be. And those don't actually qualify for the Renewable Portfolio Standard, or RPS, which is our state mandate. But within that, we do have 27% of our power sourcing that is RPS eligible. So that's full-on renewable. And then looking out to 2020, we can't tell for sure what our power mix will look like, but right now we're predicting that we'll be somewhere between 67% and 74% of our power mix will be greenhouse gas emission free. And of course that depends on load changes, weather patterns, and that type of thing. And another interesting fact, we're sitting in this building here, and a few years ago, PG&E actually helped to sponsor a solar installation on the building with a monitor in the lobby so that building occupants and people that work here could come in and see, you know, the generation of the solar installation and how much power it's generating day by day. So we do like to participate in public partnerships like that as well. And a new thing we have this year, which our customers have been asking for, we have great customers that are very green-minded, is a community solar option, the green option. And this just got approved, the first path of it just got approved this year by the Commission. That's the Green Tariff Shared Renewables Program, or the GTSR, very customer-friendly language, don't you think? Not really, but we're working on a new name for that. That's just what it's going, as it goes through the regulatory process, that's where we're at. And basically, this first option allows you to opt into a 2 to 3 cent kWh premium, so per kWh, a little extra charge. And PG&E goes into contract with different solar developers, probably power purchase agreements is what we're going to be looking at. And PG&E doesn't make any money on this. That's another question that often comes up. That 2 to 3 cents premium is basically the delivery cost plus the administration fees minus the traditional generation that you'd normally be paying for. And so that will go to support solar projects within PG&E's service territory. And then a second option that's not yet been approved, but we're in full support of and came from our customer base, was that they wanted to be able to invest directly in local solar projects that are in their community. So in this particular option, if it were to pass, basically you as the customer would go into contract with a solar developer, and PG&E would likely help to negotiate those contracts to make them more favorable for the customer. And that would be another way a certain percentage of your load could come from full renewable. So the options are growing. We already have one of the cleanest power mixes in the country, but there's basically even more choice coming to you, which I know is something we all like to have, so we can choose to be as green as we would like. Let's see. And then this next slide talks a lot about how we are planning for the future growth with our overall infrastructure and those types of investments. And so I thought I'd bring it right back to East Bay Division. And the numbers on the left there show between 2011 and 2014 the millions of dollars that we've been spending to upgrade our gas and electric system, which is really important from a safety and reliability standpoint. The graph to the right shows over time from 2014 to 2018 what we have in terms of planned spend for electric transmission and distribution. And then the far right is across all of our service area. And so these upgrades, they include many things: smart grid technology, intelligent switches, substation upgrades, rewiring, pole replacements on the gas side, getting more automated valves, gas pipeline main replacement, testing of our pipeline to make sure that everything is safe. And here in the division, we're estimating about 7 megawatts of growth per year. That's about 1%. So this is part of our plan to address that. And something new that we've never done before is that we're making this information public in all 19 of our divisions. We have booklets that we can share with the public, community members, elected officials, customers to say, these are the planned spends in all of these areas. This is what we're working on to make our system safer and stronger and more reliable. And in the past, we've hesitated to do that, I think just because budgets change, as you know, projects change, and we don't want to put it out there in writing and then have it, be different. But we're recognizing that we need to be transparent, that you deserve to know as our customer base what we're doing and how we're planning to support your community. So that's something that's made my job easier to be able to have that, and I'd be happy to share more of that with any of you as well. Let's see. Oh, and I was going to say, too, one more thing I wanted to mention. This year, we have planned in East Bay Division to invest $23.5 million in gas and $135 million on the electric side, so there's more coming. And then as far as a couple local examples, my team and I have been working specifically with Jack London Square and the Port of Oakland on a 3-year reliability plan to improve the services being delivered there. And we recently partnered with the property managers at Jack London Square and met with their tenants to review this plan. And part of it includes a major substation upgrade over the next couple of years. And that substation feeds not only Jack London Square, but also the Port of Oakland and the Maritime area, which is great. And we heard about the redevelopment of the Oakland Army Base a lot this morning, and that's a big project that's top of mind for me in the division. And we are partnering very closely with the developer, Phil Degami, the city of Oakland, just to make sure that that project continues and that our processes aren't hindering the forward momentum that we want to see happening. And along with that, we're finding that, for me, a bigger part of my job these days is communicating to the community about these big visible projects. What are the impacts to them? Is their community going to be safe? What are the benefits? And so we've been partnering very closely, having community meetings, outreach, communication, that type of thing. And that's the expectations of our stakeholders are really growing. Before we go into a community, people want to know, why are you there? What are you doing? How's it going to impact me? And we're working with community stakeholders to mitigate those impacts, whether it's noise, lane closures, traffic conditions that are changing. We're becoming more and more flexible to adjust so that businesses can stay open and to do it in a way that works for everyone. So that's something that we work on a lot. And then the other couple ways, of course, is just through our processes, the service planning process, making sure that as these new developments come on, that we have processes that are streamlined and that we're easy to do business with, which is maybe not the first thing you think of when you hear PG&E, easy to do business with, but that is something that we're working to improve as well. And if anybody has questions, again, happy to talk to you more about that. And then last, our energy efficiency program. So hopefully most of you in the room know that we have lots of energy rebates and incentives to help pay for retrofits. Also on the new construction side, if there's a new building, we have incentives that will help pay the designers and the owner to be as efficient as possible from the beginning. And maybe an area that you're not as familiar with is all the education that we do free to the public around energy efficiency. And that's for building professionals, engineers, architects, contractors. We work with universities, trade associations. And the idea is that we're providing this free education. Technology is changing all the time, so that the folks that are in those industries are getting support and making sure that we continue to develop overall as a community in a way that's very efficient and green. And one last fact I'll leave you with before I step down is that this past year, 2014, just in this division, we gave out $8.2 million in incentives for energy efficiency. So we love to do that. That's a very fun part of my role. And we'd love to help you as well, even with your home. So thank you very much. PG&E really appreciates being included today in this panel. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Colin Maynard. I'm from the Western States Petroleum Association. I work in our Strategic Communications Office. I'm going to talk to Austin and John offline about why I had to go last after all these great presentations. I wanted to come here this morning and talk to you a little bit about what refiners are doing in the Bay Area, how they're working with the community, and just talk about our economic role statewide and here in the Bay Area. I started out my career in the Capitol and right out of college, and we did a lot of defending passions and aspirational goals and talking about ideas. I always felt like we didn't grasp the facts, and I always say this in presentations because I moved on to an economic development corporation in LA. I was very happy to be there because we did input, output, and what came out was facts. I loved being there, so I'm really happy to be here this morning talking about that. So my caveat for this morning is I just had a brand new baby, and if there's pictures of my baby in here, I haven't slept in like weeks. So it's not a PR stunt, I swear. So again, our mission here is we work in the western states, California, Oregon, Washington, representing the interests of the men and women that work in the petroleum industry. And we work on policy issues. We're concerned about sustainability. We're concerned about infrastructure. I like to say we're concerned about practical solutions. So that's what we do at WISPA. And here's some facts about the California economy as pertain to how we contribute. We did a study last year that showed there's 468,000 jobs in the state directly related to our activity, the spending that we provide, the investments that we make statewide, and the labor income that comes out of our industry. So we're very proud about that. It's up and down the state. We're in urban areas, we're in rural areas, and we see the petroleum jobs as being a good job. And we'll look later at the value of that, but it's overall we're looking at a contribution that is larger than 17 other states' entire economic output. So I think the industry in California is above the state of Arkansas. So if you put it in that perspective, we're very excited about that and continue to grow. I have some just examples here where we give back in economic development, healthcare, education. Those all come directly from the revenue and tax contributions that come out of the work that we do. I said, a petroleum job is a good job. Refining here in the Bay Area is one of the leading refining sectors in the country, and actually, if you compare it to all other private industries, a job in the refining industry is more than double that of any other private sector. So that's another thing we're very proud of. We work closely with labor, we work closely with city governments and the state to make sure that those jobs are valuable to the economy, but also valuable to our customers as well. So again, 40% of the economic activity in the state that we contribute comes directly from the Bay Area, and that has directly to do with the 5 refineries that are here in the Bay Area. We talk about what goes into a refinery coming out of the maritime region and the maritime, all the ports that are here in the Bay Area, and what comes in, the crude oil that comes in, and what goes out to consumers, businesses. Refiners in the Bay Area and across the state are providing a service, providing gasoline, diesel, that power not just cars. We always talk about cars, but they're powering ships, they're powering trains, planes, and really driving the economy. There's only 100,000 electric vehicles in California. There's 34 million vehicles registered to Californians. So in terms of the impact we're having on keeping the state moving, it's overwhelming. It's something we're very proud of. I just wanted to I wasn't going to get political. I promised to stick to the facts, but I wanted to just give you an example in Sacramento. This is something that I call it the yeah buts, right? The yeah, but I'm passionate about X, or yeah, I heard X rumor about oil. There's a bill, and we fight this every session. There's a bill that would reduce petroleum, that would propose to reduce petroleum in California by 50%, transportation petroleum. And reducing that use, in our mind, is completely infeasible. Biofuels and alternatives are not up to scale. California has a proud history of being green and sustainable, but it's not there yet. And so what we're saying, we want to focus on the facts. We want to focus on how we can continue to modernize and bring more efficiencies to what we do. And the projects are evident here in the refineries in the Bay Area. But we want to work with the communities. We want to be out there working with you. And I'm happy to hear what you guys have to say about that, and I'm ready to answer any questions you have. So we're on record. You bet.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, panelists. You want to move this over a little bit? Okay. All right. So we have about 15 minutes here for some panel discussion, questions and answers. If you have your blue cards, you're filling out questions. If you could raise your hand with those blue cards, Austin and others will go around and collect those. So I do want to, I think what Colin brought up is actually a good place to start in some respects. And I want to start with a new thing I just coined, so the PR guy, see if you like this. We want to drive the thrive. How does that sound? Drive the thrive. Because I was listening to some of the panelists talk about the thriving Bay Area and how we want to keep that thrive going. And you can define thrive in a lot of different ways. The business, the economy, the environment, etc. And our goal as business people and citizens here is to keep that drive going. We want to drive the thrive. So what I'm interested in starting with, as the blue cards keep coming, is to hear from the panelists, and maybe Eunice and Beth to start, is tell us about your, it doesn't have to be your number one, but that top threat to that, the challenges to the drive, the thrive, and what we need to do, challenge the audience here, what we need to do to keep that going, to make sure that those challenges, we can live with them, but we have solutions to them. So Beth, Eunice, how's that challenge to start with?
Let's see, is it on?
Yep.
Okay. I like that, thank you. I'm the marketing person, so I like the drive to thrive and the visuals and what have you. Funny enough, our threat, and people think, oh, Southern California, Port of Oakland will never be Southern California. We don't want to be Southern California. We're not going to move 14 million TEUs through this Port of Oakland. I would say that some of the largest threats are, we've got to have the infrastructure in place. These ships are getting larger and larger. It's taking a lot longer to work them. We do need the infrastructure. We need the infrastructure funds. Really happy that Alameda County has passed Measure BB, and hopefully the Port of Oakland will be able to qualify for some of those transportation, tagged funding. In terms of another threat to thrive, without getting political or doing something that I'm not supposed to do up here, we have to make sure that we have, let's see, what's the right word? Help me out here, Richard. Healthy labor-employer relations. You can see what has just happened in the last 9 months, which essentially shut down or almost shut down, even though there was not a strike or a shutout, it almost shut down the West Coast. Those are really serious things, and we weren't in the sandbox in terms of the negotiations, but if we don't have healthy employer labor relations on our docks, we won't be able to do what we need to do. So the port's doing a lot of things to help encourage that. We're reaching out and working with the Local 10 ILWU leadership here. We're introducing them to exporters and importers so they understand all of the things that are involved, and we can, have a dialogue with customers and with labor. So I'd say labor and infrastructure.
Can you hear me? All right. So for PG&E as a utility, we're really striving to create safe, reliable, affordable power over time. And there's different ways that we do that. So I spoke to some of the investment commitments that we have over the next several years, and we're going to continue to focus on that. And not only making sure that the money goes there, but that our systems continue to improve so that we have really strong operational processes and we follow through on those commitments. So there's been a lot of new hires at the top of our company. My role is fairly new. We have local division managers that are focusing with our local operational teams day in and day out on the gas and electric side to make sure that we're continuing to do this work locally, and that when issues arise that we can solve them very quickly. And then I would say also, as we continue to grow, we know that energy is a limited resource. We know we want less emissions overall. We were one of the first utilities to come out in support of AB 32 to reduce emissions back to 1990 levels. And we have a very strong commitment to solar and renewables and energy efficiency for our customers. So we want to continue to mitigate the impacts of climate change, and hydro is really important to us, obviously. So we're going to continue to work on all of those fronts.
Great, thank you. Now I want to move to the economist at this end, and think about the same thing we were just talking about, but talk about what you think those greatest economic vulnerabilities are with respect to kind of where we were just going, and then steps or solutions to avoid or at least minimize those impacts.
Sure. I think there's three major ones. There's a lot more, but three biggies. One is what Beth referred to as infrastructure investment. We've underinvested for decades. Congestion is an issue for everybody, and that affects both truck and residential movement. So we know there's not enough money out there. The federal government isn't sending money here the way it used to, nor is the state. Cities and counties are more reliant on their own resources. Measure BB was great. We're going to have to do more of that. We're going to have more public-private partnerships. There's plenty of private capital out there willing to come in and looking for the right kind of projects to invest in. So I think we need to be getting more creative about how and in what circumstances we bring the private sector in to invest with government in critical infrastructure. Second big challenge, long-term, tough one, is I mentioned briefly earlier education. Business is going in the world where the most talented people are. That's what cities and regions and countries compete on more than anything else. We've got a great pool right now. A lot of it is imported. We love that imported talent. But if we continue to undereducate our youth, which is really, this is our seed corn for the future. And frankly, across the region, graduation rates are dismal. The level of preparation of high school students, even for community college, very often is dismal, much less for CSU or UC. We're going to get ourselves in a position we really do not want to be in, when other countries around the world are investing much more than we are, much more effectively. But the one big issue is housing. We are the most expensive place in the United States to do business in. We're the most expensive place to live in. It creates all kinds of social issues. We see that every day. It affects people without the means to pay for housing disproportionately. And it makes this a place where it's harder to attract and retain people, especially in middle income. Why is a lot of manufacturing not here anymore? Well, by the way, we're so expensive to live that a lot of the manufacturing has gone elsewhere in the country and around the world. So for a healthy, balanced economy, to keep those bright people here, we really need to address the housing issue. And there's absolutely an issue of affordable housing, workforce housing. But if there was one simple answer to that, there's a lot of answers. If there's one, you just need to build more of it in every category. The more supply, the lower the prices are going to be. And we have woefully underbuilt housing for decades. And as more people are coming into the Bay Area, as I mentioned earlier, they're pouring in all the time on top of natural population growth. We're actually falling further behind rather than catching up.
Great. Thank you, Sean. And then I want to move to the far end to Colin. Can't escape.
Great.
This is a really good question. We with the media and the ability to get information quickly, and of course how it affects us individually, we're all aware of the volatility of fuel prices, you know, low, high, et cetera. And I think this is a good question. And the question is, what will the impacts of low fuel costs do to the push for green energy, natural gas distribution, and focusing on the port-based economy in addressing that?
So what I would say is that we need to focus on bringing alternatives to market, making them sustainable, making sure that they have the ability to meet the demand that's out there today. I don't see it today, but we need to get there. And one of the things we're doing in the meantime, as a segue, is making sure that the products that we flow to consumers and into businesses meet all the requirements laid out by the state and the local jurisdictions, making sure that we're collaborating with everyone from labor to communities and being open about that process. So we're here today. We want to see what happens tomorrow.
Okay, great. Okay, now we only have a few minutes, and then we're going to take a 15-minute break. But I'd like to close with something for each of the panelists, and to springboard on something that the mayor mentioned, a term that, well, I don't know if she said this exactly, but it was close. It was kind of in the area of sustainable infrastructure, if that makes sense, right? And so from the port and industrial economy, we need to invest in that sustainable infrastructure to keep things going. That's our foundation. I don't want to talk about challenges, I want to talk about solutions, and maybe we'll start, Colin, and come this way to Sean, and that is, I'd like you to give us your thought about investment in that. Where should we be thinking? How should we invest? What should we invest? You can use whatever term, whether it's dollars, whether it's whatever you want, whatever scale you want, but focus this into investing into that sustainable infrastructure and put that challenge on us to close your session.
Two things. So investing dollars, I think modernizing infrastructure so that it's more efficient, so that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Our refiners are doing that today, and we're very proud. Some amazing technology and innovation is going into that process. Second, investing in, like I said, collaboration, investing in the relationships, hearing from the community, spending the time to be transparent and open about what we're doing. I'm very proud of that as well. And you can't do it without both. Got to do both.
Great, thank you. Eunice.
So we've spoken to this a little bit, and sustainable infrastructure is really important to PG&E. Maybe a new thing that I'll share is that we are investing a lot right now in piloting storage and trying to look at how we can connect that to the grid. And our CEO talks a lot about the grid of things and how there's going to be all these interesting opportunities coming online and a lot of cool startup companies working on new gadgets. And this future that we all want to get to, and how important the grid is going to be, and how central the grid will be to that, and how important it'll be for us to continue to build it up to make sure it's reliable and safe, like I was speaking about earlier. And we are very committed to continuing to invest in that future and to really partner locally with all these different companies that have some areas of expertise that we may not have. But as long as we make that grid strong and continue to be open to new opportunity, I think there's some really interesting future prospects that we can all work together on.
Great, thank you. Beth.
This is when I wish Richard were sitting up here instead of me, because he really heads up all of that at the Port of Oakland and has much more and deeper knowledge than I do. I think the only thing I'd like to highlight is, yes, the investments have to be made, and part of these things I think are being, part of the investments that have been made, I think they've been made because they've been regulated to be made. But that's okay. So if I look at some of the investments that the port has made, about 60 million, is that the right number for shore power? But 60 million infrastructure project invested in the Port of Oakland recently, something called shore power. So if you're ever on a boat and you're driving down the wharf there between Alameda, you'll see these little gray boxes in the like the wharf side where the ships come up and berth. Well, what that is, that's a special electrical grid that the ocean carriers actually, when they dock, plug into, so they're not burning the gook, and it lowers the emissions and so forth. So these types of things, some of them have been things that have been regulated, and the investments have had to be made. They're substantial investments, and we just have to keep on doing them for that.
All right, thank you. And Sean?
I think there's 4 big categories from the standpoint of sustainability now. One is public transit. BART's going to be facing a big bill in terms of modernization. You've been riding it lately. It's hot. The cars are getting old. They need new electrical infrastructure. So BART modernization, ferry expansion, Caltrain modernization. That's a workhorse on the peninsula. That's coming. I might tag high-speed rail. It's kind of controversial, but frankly, it's a lot cheaper to move people by trains from an environmental standpoint, from an emission standpoint, than it is for them to move by car or by plane. And SFO's on board with high-speed rail being a good alternative to flying up and down the West Coast. So public transit, really good for sustainability. Energy, smart grid. We got a big challenge coming up, but it's a good one. More renewables are coming on the grid all the time. It supports AB 32 and state policy. The grid was designed to move power in one direction, from a central generating station to homes and businesses. Now, as homes and businesses are generating their own power and selling it back in the grid, it's got to be moving all different directions. We weren't designed to support that. So we need a smart grid that'll be resilient and enable that and enable our energy policies in the state. Communications infrastructure, this is telecom. The economy is being digitized by the day. Big data is starting to rule everything. The applications are growing daily. Mobile use is expanding. We need to be investing a lot in that communications infrastructure. That's going to keep us competitive. And then finally, I think this will come up later on today, sea level rise. It's coming. It's happening. There is a high level of vulnerability all around the bay of low-lying areas. We need to be planning around, as we heard about the airport, SFO, the same story, levees, protective measures, and frankly, wetlands. Wetland restoration is a big way, a great opportunity to buffer our low-lying areas against sea level rise, especially in the South Bay. We need to be thinking about all of those things now. And by the way, a short advertisement, the Institute has 2 new studies coming out this month, one on the importance of investing in telecom and energy infrastructure for the 21st century, and another on preparing for major storm events, which combined with sea level rise really threaten a lot of our businesses and homes that are at low elevations.
Great, thank you, Sean. You know, I would love to have another hour talking about policy and environment. And you're all in luck, because after the break, that's exactly what we're going to do with our next panel. So with that, I'd like to thank our first panelists for this morning.